For years, she played the perfect wife, standing by her powerful husband as he built their empire. But when he arrived at the family dinner with his pregnant mistress, he thought he held all the power, until she revealed a truth that would change everything. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The Sterling Grand Hotel stood as a monument to luxury in the heart of the city skyline. Its gleaming facade of glass and steel reflected the setting sun, casting a golden glow over the arriving guests. At 62 stories, it was a flagship property of Sterling Industries, a hospitality conglomerate that had expanded into real estate, technology, and international development over 3 generations. On the 58th floor, in a private dining room aptly named The Crown, Rebecca Sterling moved with practiced precision. At 42, she carried herself with the poise that 20 years as the wife of Marcus Sterling had perfected. Her navy blue dress was elegant but conservative, her diamond jewelry understated but flawless. To the watching staff, she appeared to be exactly what everyone believed her to be, the perfect corporate wife. "The lighting needs to be adjusted," Rebecca instructed, gesturing toward the crystal chandelier. "Mr. Sterling prefers it slightly dimmer for these occasions." The hotel manager nodded deferentially. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling." "And the temperature?" 72 degrees exactly. Marcus gets irritable when he's too warm, especially during business discussions. As she surveyed the immaculately set table, Rebecca felt the familiar weight of the evening ahead. The annual Sterling Industries family business dinner was more than a meal. It was theater, politics, and corporate strategy in equal measure. Every detail mattered. "Mother." Sophie Sterling's voice cut through Rebecca's thoughts as her 19-year-old daughter entered the room, tall and striking. With her father's confidence and her mother's thoughtfulness, Sophie moved directly to kiss Rebecca's cheek. "Everything looks perfect as always." Behind her came Samuel, Sophie's twin brother, more reserved but equally observant. Where Sophie had inherited her father's charismatic presence, Samuel possessed a quieter intensity that reminded Rebecca of her own father. "The board members are arriving downstairs," Samuel reported, straightening his tie. "Grandfather's driver just called up." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you, Sam. And remember what we discussed. Polite, engaged, but non-committal on any business matters," he finished with a knowing smile. "I remember, Mom." Sophie rolled her eyes playfully. Another evening of watching Dad perform for his audience while we play the adoring family. How thrilling. Rebecca gave her daughter a measured look. "Tonight is important." "Isn't it always?" Sophie replied, but something in her mother's tone made her straighten slightly. "Is everything okay?" Rebecca smiled, touching her daughter's cheek gently. "Everything is exactly as it should be. Now help me greet Eleanor when she arrives. You know how particular your grandmother is about these events." As if summoned by her name, Eleanor Sterling swept into the room. At 76, Marcus's mother remained a formidable presence. With her perfectly coiffed silver hair and regal bearing, she had been the wife of Richard Sterling, the founder's son, who had expanded the original hotel business into an international brand. "Rebecca," Eleanor acknowledged with a nod that conveyed both approval of the room's arrangement and irritation at something else entirely. She checked her platinum watch with a frown. "Let me guess. My son is running late to his own dinner again. He mentioned a last-minute meeting." Rebecca replied smoothly. Eleanor sniffed disapprovingly. "Richard was never late a day in his life. Punctuality is respect, and respect is the foundation of business." She lowered her voice, leaning closer to Rebecca. "You allow him too much latitude." Rebecca's smile remained unchanged. "We all have our methods, Eleanor." The older woman studied her daughter-in-law's face before patting her hand with unexpected gentleness. "Indeed we do, my dear. Indeed we do." Over the next 30 minutes, the room filled with Sterling Industries' most important figures. The CEO of their tech division arrived with his wife, followed by the chief counsel and the heads of international development and finance. The board chairman, Harold Winters, a contemporary of Richard Sterling, entered with his signature red pocket square and booming laugh. Each was greeted personally by Rebecca, who remembered their children's names, their food preferences, and exactly which topics would most engage them. By 7:15, 14 people were seated around table, with 2 conspicuously empty chairs. one at the head of the table, traditionally Marcus's place, and another that remained unassigned. At 7:20, Rebecca nodded to the waiting staff. "Let's begin with cocktails. Mr. Sterling would want us to start in his absence," Eleanor commented from her place near the head of the table. "He's always been theatrical. Even as a boy, he couldn't simply enter a room. He had to make an entrance." Rebecca simply smiled as she took a sip of her sparkling water. "Indeed, and tonight won't disappoint." At that precise moment, the double doors to the private dining room swung open, and Marcus Sterling finally arrived. 40 minutes late. At 45, he was still strikingly handsome, with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to commanding attention. His tailored suit and perfectly knotted tie spoke of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. But it wasn't Marcus's appearance that caused the room to fall silent. It was the woman on his arm. She was beautiful, perhaps 28 or 29, with glossy black hair and delicate features. Her red dress was both elegant and revealing, hugging her figure and highlighting what was unmistakably a pregnancy, approximately 5 months along. "Good evening, everyone," Marcus announced, his voice filling the room with practiced ease. "I apologize for our tardiness. I'd like to introduce Vanessa Chun, our Special Project Director for Asian Markets." He paused, his eyes finally landing on Rebecca, who remained perfectly still at her end of the table. A slight smile played at the corner of his mouth as he delivered the line he had clearly rehearsed. "And the mother of my son, the next heir to Sterling Industries." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room moved from Marcus to Rebecca, waiting for her reaction. Eleanor's hand tightened around her water glass, and the twins exchanged a glance loaded with meaning that no one else caught. Marcus continued into silence. "I know this is unexpected, but business is about adapting to change, and Sterling Industries is preparing for its future." Beside him, Vanessa Chen's smile faltered slightly. She was clearly uncomfortable with the tension, but the protective way Marcus held her arm suggested she trusted him completely. Her free hand rested on a round belly in an unconsciously protective gesture. The entire room held its collective breath, waiting for Rebecca's response. Instead of tears or rage, Rebecca rose gracefully from her chair and approached the couple. Her face betrayed no emotion beyond polite interest as she extended her hand to Vanessa. "Welcome to our family dinner, Miss Chun," she said, her voice warm and steady. "Please sit here next to me, the honored guest place." Vanessa's eyes widened in surprise as she took Rebecca's offered hand. "Thank you, Mrs. St. That's very kind." Rebecca turned to the servers who stood frozen by the wall. "We can begin now, and bring Mr. Sterling his preferred Bordeaux." As Rebecca guided Vanessa to the seat beside her own, Marcus remained standing, visibly confused by the reaction. This wasn't the script he had planned. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched his wife seat his mistress with the composure of a seasoned hostess. "You said she would be upset," Vanessa whispered to Marcus as he finally took his seat at the head of the table. "She seems fine." Marcus dismissed her concern with a forced smile, though a muscle in his jaw tightened. "She's just in shock," he muttered. "It will hit her later." Across the table, Eleanor exchanged a knowing glance with Rebecca, while the twins maintained carefully composed expressions. But those who knew them might have noticed the glint of anticipation in their eyes. As the first course was served, Rebecca led the conversation with practiced ease, asking Vanessa about her background and work experience. To everyone's surprise, Vanessa was clearly intelligent and well-versed in international business, particularly the expanding Chinese luxury market. "I was impressed with Sterling's potential in Shanghai," Vanessa explained, gradually relaxing under Rebecca's genuine interest. "The luxury hotel market there is saturated, but no one has successfully merged Western luxury standards with authentic Chinese cultural elements." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "That's precisely what Marcus has struggled to articulate to the board. Harold, didn't you question the viability of our Shanghai expansion last quarter?" Harold Winters, the board chairman, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, yes. The projections seemed optimistic, without a clear differentiator." Vanessa sat up straighter. "The differentiator is understanding that Chinese consumers don't want a Western hotel with Chinese decorations. They want an experience that honors their cultural values while providing the efficiency and luxury they associate with Western brands. As Vanessa continued explaining her vision, Marcus watched with growing unease. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to unfold. Rebecca was meant to be humiliated, not conducting a business discussion with his mistress as if they were colleagues. By the time the main course arrived, Vanessa had unwittingly impressed most of the table with her market insights. Rebecca had skillfully guided the conversation to showcase Vanessa's professional abilities rather than focus on the scandalous nature of her presence. "Tell me, Miss Chin, where did you complete your education?" Eleanor asked, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp. "Harvard Business School, Mrs. Sterling. I was fortunate to receive the Hamilton International Fellowship." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Impressive. That's quite competitive." "Vanessa was top of her class," Marcus interjected, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "That's why I recruited her personally for the Asian expansion project." "How long have you been with Sterling Industries?" Rebecca asked, serving Vanessa a portion of the roasted vegetables before helping herself. Vanessa hesitated, glancing at Marcus. "Almost 2 years now." Rebecca nodded. "And when did you and Marcus, your personal relationship?" The table went silent again. Marcus set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. "Rebecca, perhaps this isn't." "No, it's all right," Vanessa interrupted, her composure surprising everyone. "We've been involved for about 14 months. I understand this situation is unconventional, Mrs. Sterling, and I don't blame you for asking direct questions." Rebecca's smile was genuine. "I appreciate your honesty, Vanessa, and please call me Rebecca." As the main course plates were cleared, Rebecca remained the picture of composure. Nothing in her demeanor suggested she was a woman whose husband had just publicly humiliated her with his pregnant mistress. If anything, she seemed to be the one in control of the room. Marcus watched her with growing suspicion. This wasn't the Rebecca he thought he knew, the supportive, somewhat naive woman who had spent 15 years standing in his shadow, grateful for the Sterling name and lifestyle. Something was different tonight, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt uncertain about what would happen next. As the servers moved silently around the table, clearing the main course plates, Marcus attempted to reassert his authority. He tapped his knife against his crystal water glass, drawing all eyes to him. "Since we're discussing the future of Sterling Industries," he began, his confident smile returning, "I think this is an appropriate time to outline some of the changes I've been planning." Rebecca took a slow sip of her water, her eyes never leaving her husband's face. "The board has been concerned about our growth projections for the coming fiscal year," Marcus continued, directing his comments primarily to Harold Winters and the other board members. "But with our new ventures in Singapore and the special partnership Vanessa has been cultivating in Shanghai, we're positioned for our most aggressive expansion in company history." He gestured casually toward Vanessa, "Our personal relationship notwithstanding. Vanessa's connections with the Jiao Group will open doors that have been closed to Western companies for decades." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and a flash of something, perhaps doubt, crossed her features before she composed herself again. "I've been reviewing the preliminary paperwork for the creation of Sterling Asia, a new subsidiary that will handle all our Pacific Rim operations," Marcus continued. "The documentation should be ready for the board's review next week, but I wanted to give you all a preview of—" "Marcus," Rebecca interrupted gently, setting down her water glass. "Before we dive into business projections, I'd like to know more about your plans for your family." The question caught him off guard. "My family?" "Yes," Rebecca said, her voice steady. "You've announced that Vanessa is carrying the next heir to Sterling Industries. I'm curious about your intentions regarding the twins, our current children, and of course our marriage." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Samuel studied the tablecloth, while Sophie watched her father with undisguised contempt. Marcus cleared his throat. "Obviously, this is a complex personal situation that will require adjustments for everyone. I had hoped to discuss the details with you privately, Rebecca. But since you've asked," he straightened in his chair, "I've instructed our attorneys to prepare divorce papers. You'll find the settlement more than generous." A few board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. "And the twins?" Rebecca pressed. "You mentioned a next heir. What does that mean for Sophie and Samuel's position in the company?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "They're 19, Rebecca. They have years before they need to concern themselves with corporate positions. Samuel has always been more interested in his environmental causes anyway. And Sophie, he glanced at his daughter, whose expression had hardened. Well, Sophie has yet to demonstrate a serious interest in the business, beyond spending its profits. Sophie's knuckles whitened around her water glass, but she said nothing. I see, Rebecca replied. And Vanessa will be taking my place at company functions? As the mother of the heir? Vanessa looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mrs. Sterling, Rebecca, I want you to know that I never intended. It's all right, Vanessa, Rebecca said kindly. I'm not blaming you. I'm simply trying to understand the new arrangement Marcus has planned for all of us. Marcus leaned forward. This doesn't have to be unpleasant, Rebecca. You've had a good run as Mrs. Sterling. The settlement will allow you to live very comfortably. Perhaps that villa in Tuscany you've always admired. Rebecca studied her husband for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled, not the polite smile of a hostess, but something different that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. How thoughtful of you, Marcus. But before we discuss Italian real estate, I wonder if anyone would care for dessert. She nodded to the waiting staff. I've asked Chef Pascal to prepare his famous chocolate souffle. I believe it's your favorite, Harold? The board chairman nodded, clearly relieved by the change in subject. Indeed, Rebecca. No one does it better than Pascal. As the dessert was being prepared, Rebecca guided the conversation to neutral topics. Samuel's recent conservation project, Sophie's photography exhibition, and Eleanor's charity foundation. Throughout it all, Marcus watched his wife with growing irritation. She was supposed to be devastated, not hosting a pleasant dinner conversation. When the soufflés arrived, each one rising in perfect form above its ramekin, Rebecca turned her attention back to Vanessa. Tell me, Vanessa, has Marcus shown you the Sterling family photo albums? The history of the company? Vanessa shook her head. Not yet. He's mentioned his father and grandfather, of course. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. The Sterling men have always been very proud of their legacy. Richard, Marcus's father, was particularly concerned with how the company would be passed down through generations. Marcus set down his spoon with a clatter. Rebecca, I don't think anyone needs a history lesson during dessert. On the contrary, Eleanor interjected, speaking up for the first time in a while. I think it's important for Vanessa to understand the family she's joining, especially as the mother of a potential heir. The emphasis she placed on potential wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Richard was an interesting man, Rebecca continued, ignoring Marcus's obvious displeasure. Very traditional in many ways, but surprisingly progressive in others. He believed strongly in meritocracy within the family structure. Harold Winters nodded. That's true. Richard often said blood wasn't enough to earn leadership. You had to prove your worth to the Sterling name. Rebecca smiled. Exactly. He was also quite innovative in how he structured the company when he stepped down. Something in her tone caused Marcus to study her more carefully. What do you mean? Vanessa asked, genuinely interested. Richard had watched many family companies destroy themselves through infighting and poor succession planning, Rebecca explained. He was determined that Sterling Industries would avoid that fate. Marcus interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin. My father left the company to me, his only son. End of story. Can we please focus on the future rather than ancient history? Rebecca's smile never faltered. But that's just it, Marcus. To understand our future, we need to be clear about our past. She turned to address the entire table. 15 years ago, when Marcus and I married, Richard was still CEO. He stepped down 6 months later, and Marcus has operated as though he inherited complete control of the company. Harold Winters shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Eleanor's expression remained carefully neutral. Because I did, Marcus said flatly. Father signed over his controlling interest to me when he retired. Everyone at this table knows that. Not exactly, Rebecca replied. Her voice remained conversational, but something had changed in her demeanor. A subtle shift from polite hostess to something else entirely. Richard transferred his shares, yes, but the control structure he created was quite specific. She reached into her purse and removed a slim silver case, from which she extracted a single folded document. I have a copy here. if anyone would like to review it. Marcus stared at the paper. What is that? The original trust document that Richard created when he restructured the company, Rebecca answered. The one that places 57% of voting shares in a trust controlled by, and I quote, the spouse of the CEO. The silence that followed was absolute. That's impossible, Marcus finally said, his voice tight. I've controlled those shares for 15 years. You've exercised voting rights as a proxy, Rebecca corrected him gently. With my authorization, which I provided for every board meeting and major decision. Check the records, Harold. You'll find my signature on every proxy document since Richard stepped down. The board chairman's face had gone pale. She's right, he said after a moment. I never thought much of it, just standard paperwork for a CEO's wife. Marcus's face darkened with anger. This is absurd. Even if such a document exists, it was clearly my father's intention that I control the company. Actually, Eleanor said, finally joining the conversation. Richard was quite explicit about his intentions. He saw how you behaved with your first wife, Marcus. He was determined that your second marriage would be a true partnership, at least in business terms. Marcus stared at his mother in disbelief. You knew about this? Of course I knew, Eleanor replied calmly. It was Richard's way of ensuring you wouldn't repeat your past mistakes. He believed a man who couldn't be trusted with a marriage shouldn't have unchecked control of a family legacy. Vanessa was looking increasingly distressed. Marcus, what are they talking about? You told me your first marriage ended amicably. Sophie let out a short, harsh laugh that she quickly disguised as a cough. This is preposterous, Marcus declared, his voice rising. Rebecca has never involved herself in company business beyond attending functions and hosting dinners. Publicly, no, Rebecca agreed. That was our arrangement. You wanted the spotlight, and I was content to observe from the shadows. But I've been reviewing every report, every proposal, every financial statement for 15 years. She has, Samuel confirmed quietly. Mom has a complete office at home. I've seen her working there since I was a kid. Marcus turned to his son with a look of betrayal. You knew about this too? Samuel met his father's gaze steadily. I learned about it gradually. Mom never spoke against you, if that's what you're wondering. She just made sure Sophie and I understood the business from all angles, not just yours. Marcus turned back to Rebecca, his composure cracking. So what's your point? Are you planning some sort of coup? Using this technicality to threaten me because you're upset about Vanessa? Rebecca's expression softened slightly. This isn't about Vanessa, Marcus, or not entirely. It's about the company's future and what you've been doing with sterling assets for the past 7 months. She nodded to her assistant, who had been standing unobtrusively near the door. The young woman approached with a stack of leather portfolios, which she distributed to everyone at the table. What is this? Marcus demanded, not opening his folder. Financial records, Rebecca replied calmly. Specifically, documentation of how you've been moving Sterling Industries assets to shell companies in Singapore. Companies that list you as the sole owner, not Sterling Industries. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. The Singapore expansion. The one you said would be our new headquarters? She turned to Marcus, her eyes wide with shock. You told me that was all approved by the board. Harold Winters had opened his portfolio and was scanning the contents with increasing alarm. These transactions were never presented to the board. This is, he looked up at Marcus. This is embezzlement, plain and simple. It's a restructuring, Marcus snapped, to optimize our tax position and streamline international operations. By removing company assets from a company? Rebecca asked. That's an interesting definition of restructuring. Vanessa was now staring at Marcus with a horrified expression. You said we were building something legitimate, something for our son's future. We are, Marcus insisted, reaching for her hand. Vanessa pulled away from him. Then why does this document show that the Singapore company is in your name only? Not even my name is on it, let alone Sterling Industries. The room had erupted into murmurs as the board members reviewed the evidence in their portfolios. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a setup, he declared, looking around the table. Rebecca has clearly manipulated these documents out of jealousy. The documents came directly from our banking partners in Singapore, Rebecca replied. I've already verified their authenticity with 3 independent forensic accountants. The originals are in the possession of our legal department. She turned to address the board members directly. Gentlemen, ladies, I've called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. I suggest you review these materials carefully before then. Marcus stared at his wife in disbelief. You're really doing this? Destroying everything I've built because your pride is hurt? For the first time that evening, a flash of genuine emotion crossed Rebecca's face. Not anger, but something like disappointment. I'm protecting what your father and grandfather built, Marcus, and what our children deserve to inherit someday, legitimately. She turned to Vanessa, her expression softening again. You can keep the penthouse for now, she said to Marcus. Vanessa will need somewhere comfortable in her condition. Vanessa looked up, startled at being directly addressed. I don't blame you, Rebecca continued, speaking directly to the younger woman. He's quite convincing. Call me if you need anything for the baby. As Marcus started to object, Vanessa suddenly interrupted him, removing her hand from his grip to create physical distance between them. You told me your wife was just a figurehead, she said, her voice trembling slightly, that she had no real role in the company. You said we were building something for our son's future. She turned to Rebecca. I didn't know about any of this. About you. Rebecca responded with unexpected compassion. Few people do. That was the point. The dinner had completely unraveled. Board members were on their phones, presumably calling their own legal counsel. Eleanor sat back in her chair, watching her son with an expression of profound disappointment. The twins remained silent, though Sophie couldn't quite hide the satisfaction in her eyes as she watched her father's carefully constructed world collapsing around him. In the midst of the chaos, Rebecca remained perfectly composed, as she had been from the moment Marcus walked in with Vanessa on his arm. But now, looking more closely, one could see that her composure wasn't born of shock or denial. It was the calm confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. As the implications of Rebecca's revelation sank in around the table, the elegant dining room transformed into something resembling a war room. Board members huddled in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers while occasionally glancing toward Marcus, whose face had become a mask of barely controlled fury. Rebecca remained seated, her posture relaxed, as she observed the fallout. When her phone vibrated with a text message, she glanced down at it briefly and nodded to herself. Everything was proceeding according to plan. This is absurd, Marcus finally declared, loud enough to silence the room. You can't possibly believe you can take control of Sterling Industries based on some obscure clause in my father's paperwork. Rebecca regarded him calmly. It's not obscure, Marcus. It's quite explicit, and I'm not taking control. I've had it all along. I'm simply choosing to exercise it directly now, rather than through you. And why now, he demanded, after 15 years of playing the dutiful wife? Why this sudden power grab? Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. Because for 15 years, you operated within certain boundaries. You made some questionable decisions, certainly, but nothing that threatened the company's fundamental integrity or future. That changed 7 months ago. She turned to Harold Winters. Harold, when did Marcus first mention the Singapore expansion of the board? The chairman frowned in concentration. February, I believe. He presented it as a strategic repositioning for our Asian operations. February 12th, to be precise, Rebecca confirmed. 3 days after he opened the first shell company in Singapore. She turned back to Marcus. That was your mistake. If you had created legitimate subsidiary companies with proper board approval, I might have continued our arrangement indefinitely. Vanessa, who had been listening intently, suddenly straightened. February, she asked, her voice small but steady. You started this in February? Marcus waved dismissively. The timing isn't important. It is to me, Vanessa insisted. Because in February, I told you I was pregnant. A new silence fell over the room as this implication settled. You started moving money as soon as you knew about the baby, Vanessa continued, the realization dawning on her face. That's why you suddenly proposed the Singapore office. It wasn't about Sterling Industries expanding. It was about you creating an escape plan. Don't be ridiculous, Marcus snapped. The Singapore strategy has been in development for years. No, it hasn't, Sophie interjected, speaking for the first time since her father's arrival. Dad, I literally heard you tell Mom 3 years ago that Singapore was oversaturated and not worth our investment. I remember because it was during that dinner with the Malaysian ambassador. Marcus glared at his daughter. Stay out of this, Sophie. Why should she? Samuel asked, his quiet voice carrying surprising authority. This affects her future too. Both of our futures. Rebecca nodded to her children with evident pride before turning back to the board members. As you can see from the documentation, Marcus has already transferred approximately $43 million in company assets to his personal control. I've frozen those accounts as of this afternoon. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. You had no right. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway. She had both the right and the legal obligation. All heads turned to see David Chun, Sterling Industries' chief legal counsel, entering the room with a leather briefcase. He nodded respectfully to Rebecca before addressing the entire table. As corporate counsel, I spent the past 3 weeks reviewing Mrs. Sterling's evidence and the original company structure established by Richard Sterling. Her interpretation of the controlling interest is legally sound. Marcus stared at the lawyer in disbelief. You work for me, David. I work for Sterling Industries, Chun corrected firmly. And my fiduciary duty is to the company, not to any individual executive. He placed his briefcase on the table and removed several documents. Mrs. Sterling contacted me 97 days ago with initial concerns about irregularities in the Singapore transactions. After preliminary investigation confirmed her suspicions, I advised her to gather comprehensive evidence before taking action. Rebecca smiled slightly. 97 days. During which time, Marcus, you never once suspected that I knew what you were doing. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcus's face. 97 days? You've been planning this for over 3 months. I've been watching you for 15 years, Rebecca replied simply. I just decided to act 3 months ago. She turned to address Vanessa directly. That was around the time Marcus likely told you he was leaving me, wasn't it? When your pregnancy would have been confirmed via amniocentesis. Vanessa nodded slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. He said he was waiting for the right time to tell you, that he needed to secure our future first. Rebecca's expression was sympathetic. He was securing his future, Vanessa, not yours, and certainly not your child's. Marcus stood abruptly. This is character assassination. I won't stand here and listen to these fabrications. They're not fabrication, Mr. Sterling, David Chun said quietly, sliding a document across the table. This is a termination notice, effective immediately, removing you from your position as CEO of Sterling Industries, pending the full board's vote tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at the paper without touching it. This is a coup, a conspiracy between my wife and your father. Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp with disappointment. This is Richard's work, Marcus. He knew you better than you think. He saw your ambition, your talents, but also your weaknesses. She looked at Rebecca with newfound respect. Richard chose better than he knew when he approved your marriage. He thought Rebecca would be a moderating influence, someone who could guide you subtly when needed. He never anticipated she would need to step in completely. Marcus turned on his mother. So you're siding with her now? Against your own son? Eleanor's expression remained stern. I'm siding with Sterling Industries and its future, as Richard would have done. With deliberate movements, Eleanor removed an ornate gold and sapphire ring from her right hand, the same ring Richard Sterling had given her on their wedding day 52 years earlier. She rose from her seat and walked around the table to where Rebecca sat. This belongs to the true head of the Sterling family, she said, placing the ring in Rebecca's palm and closing her fingers around it. The symbolism of the gesture was lost on no one in the room. For decades, that ring had represented the continuity of the Sterling legacy. Now it had passed not to the son, but to the woman who had silently protected the family's interests while her husband pursued his own agenda. Marcus looked as though he had been physically struck. Mother? Enough, Marcus, Eleanor said, her voice weary but resolute. It's time to accept the consequences of your choices. As Marcus confronted the company lawyer, demanding to see the full termination documents, Vanessa quietly leaned toward Rebecca. "What happens to me now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca reached into her purse and removed a business card, which she slid discreetly to Vanessa. "My private number. This isn't about punishing you or the child." Vanessa studied Rebecca's face, searching for signs of anger or resentment but finding none. "Why are you being kind to me? I'm carrying your husband's child. I believed I was going to replace you." "Because this isn't a soap opera, Vanessa," Rebecca replied softly. "This is real life, with real consequences for everyone involved, including an innocent child. My quarrel isn't with you. It's with the man who lied to both of us." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not staying with him," she said suddenly, her voice finding new strength. "Not after this. I won't raise my son with a man who—" She broke off, unable to finish. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Rebecca assured her. "But when you're ready to talk, call me. Your child is connected to my children, whether Marcus remains in the picture or not." Across the room, Marcus had apparently finished reviewing the termination documents and was now advancing toward Rebecca, his face flushed with anger. "This isn't over," he declared. "I have connections, resources that aren't yours," Rebecca corrected. "The financial team has already audited your known accounts. The properties in Aspen and Miami have been frozen, as has your private investment portfolio. You'll retain your personal bank account and the penthouse for now, but nothing derived from Sterling Industries assets." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "You can't just erase me from my own family's company." "You were doing a fine job of that yourself," Rebecca replied, her voice finally betraying a hint of anger. "The difference is that you were planning to take the money and run. I'm staying to rebuild what you nearly destroyed." She turned to David Chin. "Is security ready?" The lawyer nodded. "They're outside, Mrs. Sterling." Marcus looked from Rebecca to the lawyer and back again. "Security? You're having me escorted out? Like a criminal?" "Like an executive who's been terminated for cause," Rebecca corrected. "Standard protocol, as you know. You've ordered it done to others often enough." Marcus turned to Vanessa, suddenly remembering her presence. "Come on," he said, grabbing her arm. "We're leaving." Vanessa pulled away from him. "No," she said firmly. "I need to think." "Don't be ridiculous," Marcus snapped. "You're coming with me. We'll sort this out." "I said no," Vanessa repeated, her voice stronger now. She unconsciously moved closer to Rebecca. "I'm staying here until I figure out what to do." Marcus looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as an accessory or a trophy, but as a woman capable of making her own decisions. The realization seemed to shake him more than anything else that had happened. "Fine," he said finally, his voice cold. "Stay with her. You'll see soon enough that this is nothing but a temporary power play. I built Sterling Industries into what it is today. It won't function without me." Rebecca shook her head slightly. "You didn't build it, Marcus. You inherited it and nearly dismantled it for your own gain." At her nod, 2 security officers entered the room. They approached Marcus with professional detachment. "Mr. Sterling, we'll escort you to collect your personal items from your office and then to your vehicle," one of them said. For a moment, it seemed Marcus might resist, but then his shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. The fight had gone out of him, temporarily at least. Without another word, he allowed himself to be led from the room, though not before casting a final, venomous glance at Rebecca. As the doors closed behind him, the remaining dinner guests looked at each other in stunned silence. The evening had transformed from an anticipated family business dinner to a complete restructuring of one of the city's most prominent companies. Rebecca took a deep breath and released it slowly, the first visible sign of tension she had displayed all evening. Then, with the same composure she had maintained throughout, she signaled to the waiting staff. "Please, everyone, the evening isn't over yet," she said, her voice steady once again. "Chef Pascal has prepared his famous chocolate soufflés, and it would be a shame to let them go to waste." As the desserts were served, conversations gradually resumed around the table. Board members discussed the upcoming emergency meeting. Eleanor engaged Vanessa in a surprisingly gentle conversation about her pregnancy and health. The twins exchanged glances of mingled shock and admiration for their mother. Through it all, Rebecca maintained her role as the perfect hostess, as she had for 15 years. But now everyone at the table understood that her poise wasn't simply that of a corporate wife fulfilling her social duties. It was the calculated composure of a woman who had been silently at the helm all along, waiting for precisely the right moment to take visible control. The executive boardroom of Sterling Industries occupied the entire west side of the 53rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. At precisely 8:45 the following morning, Rebecca Sterling stepped off the private elevator, followed by David Chun and a team of 3 financial analysts. Unlike the previous evening, when she had dressed in understated elegance, today Rebecca wore a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority. The only touch of color was a sapphire brooch that matched Eleanor's ring, which now adorned her right hand. "The board members are already arriving," David informed her as they walked toward the boardroom. "Harold has been briefing them individually since 6 this morning." Rebecca nodded, reviewing notes on her tablet. "And operations? Has there been any disruption?" "Minimal," one of the analysts replied. "We implemented the contingency protocols at 5 a.m. All critical systems and communication channels have been secured. Mr. Sterling's access credentials were revoked at midnight. His executive assistant, Miss Farrow, has agreed to stay on and assist with the transition. She's waiting in your office, the CEO's office, whenever you're ready to meet with her." Rebecca paused, looking momentarily surprised. "Jennifer is staying? I thought she was completely loyal to Marcus." David smiled slightly. She said, and I quote, "I'm loyal to Sterling Industries, and I already know how Mrs. Sterling takes her coffee." This drew a small laugh from Rebecca. Smart woman. She always saw more than Marcus realized. As they approached the boardroom, Rebecca could see through the glass walls that most of the board had already assembled. Harold Winters was standing at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically as he spoke. The expressions around the table ranged from concern to outright anger. "Are we expecting Marcus?" Rebecca asked David quietly. "His attorney called 20 minutes ago. Marcus won't be attending, but his lawyer will be here as an observer." Rebecca nodded. "Good. I'd rather handle this without his theatrical interruptions." Before entering, she paused to compose herself. Despite her outward confidence, Rebecca was acutely aware of the magnitude of what she was about to do. For 15 years, she had operated in the shadows, influencing through subtle suggestions and carefully placed insights. Today, she would step fully into the light, taking formal control of an empire with over 15,000 employees worldwide. At exactly 9 a.m., Rebecca entered the boardroom. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "Thank you all for adjusting your schedules on such short notice." Harold Winters stepped aside, yielding the position at the head of the table to Rebecca without hesitation. "Mrs. Sterling, Rebecca has our full agenda prepared." Rebecca took her seat as David Chun distributed comprehensive packets to each board member. "You've all had time to review the preliminary materials provided last night," she began. "What you're receiving now is the complete forensic accounting report, along with the proposed recovery strategy and an immediate leadership transition plan." A distinguished-looking man in his 60s, Rebecca recognized him as Marcus's attorney, James Warrington, raised his hand. "Mrs. Sterling, I must formally object to these proceedings. My client has not been given adequate time to respond to these allegations." Rebecca met his gaze directly. "Mr. Warrington, these are not merely allegations. They are documented facts that have been independently verified by 3 separate accounting firms." She gestured to the financial team standing near the door. "Your client is welcome to commission his own forensic analysis, but I should warn you that the evidence is irrefutable." Nevertheless, Warrington continued, "the sudden removal of a CEO without is explicitly permitted under Article 7 of our corporate bylaws." Rebecca finished for him. "In cases of documented financial malfeasance, the controlling shareholder may take immediate action to protect company assets. pending full board review. She smiled slightly. I'm sure Marcus has explained that I am, in fact, that controlling shareholder. Warrington's expression suggested that Marcus had done no such thing. Harold Winters cleared his throat. For the record, I've reviewed all legal documentation with our corporate counsel. Mrs. Sterling's authority in this matter is absolute and legally binding. The purpose of today's meeting is not to debate her right to act, but to formalize the transition and establish next steps. Rebecca nodded her thanks to Harold before addressing the entire board. I understand this is unexpected for many of you. For 15 years, Marcus has been the public face of Sterling Industries, while I've remained largely in the background. That was by mutual agreement, and it suited my purposes at the time. She opened her own copy of the report and directed their attention to specific pages. However, as you can see from sections 3 through 7, Marcus began systematically diverting company assets approximately 7 months ago. The pattern accelerated dramatically in February, coinciding with, she paused considering how to phrase it, personal developments in his life. Victoria Jiao, the newest and youngest board member, spoke up. These Singapore entities, they appear to be structured for eventual separation from Sterling Industries altogether. Precisely, Rebecca confirmed. Based on the documentation we've recovered, Marcus was creating a parallel corporate structure that he alone controlled. The Singapore operation was designed to eventually absorb our most profitable Asian properties, while leaving the parent company with the debt. James Warrington shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. The immediate question, Rebecca continued, is how to recover these assets with minimal disruption to our operations and public image. Page 23 outlines our proposed strategy. For the next hour, Rebecca led the board through a detailed recovery plan. She demonstrated a command of the company's finances and operations that clearly surprised many of the board members, who had previously known her only as Marcus's wife. She fielded complex questions about international banking regulations, addressed potential media responses, and outlined a comprehensive restructuring of the Asian division that would strengthen, rather than weaken, Sterling Industries' position in the market. By the time they reached the final section of the report, even Marcus's attorney had fallen silent, taking copious notes to report back to his client. This brings us to the leadership transition, Rebecca said, closing her portfolio. Effective immediately, I will assume the role of CEO on an interim basis. David Chen will continue as Chief Legal Officer, with expanded authority over compliance and ethics. I'm proposing Jennifer Farrow, currently Marcus's executive assistant, for the position of Chief of Staff to ensure continuity in day-to-day operations. Harold Winters nodded his approval. And the longer-term plan? Within 90 days, I will present a permanent leadership structure for board approval, Rebecca replied. During that time, I welcome your input and suggestions. Sterling Industries has always been stronger when we leverage our collective expertise. Victoria Jiao leaned forward. And what message do we send to our employees and shareholders? This is a significant change that will inevitably raise questions. Rebecca had clearly anticipated this question. By noon today, we will issue a statement announcing my appointment as interim CEO, citing Marcus's departure to pursue personal interests. We'll emphasize continuity, stability, and our commitment to ethical business practices. She continued with confidence. For our major clients and partners, I'll be conducting personal outreach over the next 48 hours. Many of them already know me from various company functions, and I've been quietly involved in key relationship management for years. James Warrington finally spoke again. And my client? What is being offered to Marcus Sterling beyond the termination we've already discussed? Rebecca's expression remained professional, but her voice cooled noticeably. Mr. Warrington, your client attempted to divert over $40 million of company assets for his personal use. Under normal circumstances, that would warrant criminal charges. The attorney paled slightly. However, Rebecca continued, for the sake of the Sterling name and the company's reputation, I'm prepared to handle this as an internal matter, provided Marcus cooperates fully with the asset recovery and makes no public statements that could damage Sterling Industries. She slid a document across the table to Warrington. These are our terms. Marcus retains his personal assets acquired prior to the malfeasance, receives a severance package aligned with our executive departure policies, and signs a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. In exchange, Sterling Industries will not pursue criminal charges. The attorney reviewed the document briefly. I'll present this to my client, but I can't guarantee his response. Of course, Rebecca replied smoothly. Please inform Marcus that he has 24 hours to accept these terms. After that, our legal options will be reassessed. As the meeting concluded and board members began to file out, several paused to speak personally with Rebecca. Victoria Shaw lingered until they were alone, except for David Chin. I'm impressed, she said candidly. I've been on this board for 8 months, and I had no idea you were so thoroughly versed in every aspect of the business. Rebecca smiled. Few people did. That was by design. May I ask why? Victoria inquired. Why stay in the background for so long when you clearly had the capability to lead? Rebecca considered the question carefully before answering. 15 years ago when I married Marcus, Sterling Industries was still very much an old boys club. Richard understood that, which is why he structured the company the way he did, giving me control, but allowing Marcus to be the face. She looked out at the city skyline. Over time, I came to see the advantage of my position. I could observe, learn, and influence without triggering the defensive reactions that women in power often face. Marcus took credit for my ideas, but that meant he also implemented them until he crossed a line, until he threatened the company's future. Victoria supplied, Rebecca corrected, and by extension, the future that belongs to my children, and now to Vanessa's child as well. Victoria raised an eyebrow at this mention of Marcus's pregnant girlfriend. That's remarkably generous of you. Most women in your position would want nothing to do with the child. Rebecca shook her head slightly. That child is innocent in all this. And regardless of how I feel about Marcus's behavior, that baby will be a half-sibling to my children. Family is family. As Victoria left, David Chin approached with a stack of documents requiring Rebecca's immediate attention. The press release is drafted for your review, and Jennifer is coordinating calls with our top 10 clients. Also, Vanessa Chin called while you were in the meeting. Rebecca looked up from papers. Vanessa? Where is she? Still at the hotel. She asked if you could meet her for lunch. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Schedule it for 1 o'clock in my private dining room. And David, thank you for everything. The lawyer smiled. Richard would be proud of how you've handled this. He always said you were the best decision Marcus ever made. After he left, Rebecca stood alone in the boardroom, looking out at the city where Sterling Industries had begun 3 generations earlier with a single hotel. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, not uncomfortably, but with a finality that acknowledged the transformation of her role from hidden power to visible authority. She glanced down at Richard's sapphire ring on her finger and smiled slightly. The old man had been craftier than anyone gave him credit for. He'd recognized something in his quiet daughter-in-law that his own son had failed to see: the patience, intelligence, and strength to protect what mattered most when the time came. At precisely 1 o'clock, Vanessa arrived for lunch, looking tired but composed. She had changed from the previous evening's cocktail dress into a simple maternity outfit that emphasized her professional rather than glamorous side. Thank you for seeing me, she said as she took a seat at the small table in Rebecca's private dining room. I wasn't sure you would want to, after everything that's happened. Rebecca poured tea for both of them. I meant what I said last night. My issue is with Marcus, not with you. Vanessa studied her carefully. Marcus called me this morning. He wants me to move into the penthouse with him. He says this is all temporary, that his lawyers will fix everything, and he'll be back in charge within weeks. And what do you think? Rebecca asked, her tone neutral. I think he's delusional, Vanessa replied flatly. I spent the night reading through all the documents from the dinner. He stole from his own company. He lied to everyone, including me. She placed a protective hand on her stomach. I won't have my son raised by a man with no moral compass. Rebecca nodded. Have you decided what you'll do instead? That's partly why I wanted to see you, Vanessa admitted. I've been offered a position with the Jiao Group in Hong Kong, a legitimate one based on my actual qualifications. Victoria Shaw reached out this morning. Victoria works quickly, Rebecca commented with a small smile. It's a good opportunity. The Jiao Group is one of our most respected partners, It would mean leaving the country, Vanessa pointed out, taking Marcus's child overseas. Rebecca, consider this. Marcus has forfeited any right to dictate your choices. But if you're concerned about family connections, we can make arrangements. My children should know their half-brother, regardless of the circumstances. Vanessa looked surprised. You'd want that? Even after what Marcus did? Children shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes, Rebecca said simply. Sophie and Samuel understand that as well. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand you, Rebecca. By all rights, you should hate me. Rebecca reached across the table and briefly touched Vanessa's hand. Would that change anything? Would hate undo what's happened or make the future any better? Before Vanessa could respond, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it. Marcus is downstairs, demanding to be allowed up. Vanessa tensed. I don't want to see him right now. You don't have to, Rebecca assured her. Security won't let him pass the lobby without my authorization. She considered for a moment. Though perhaps it's better to have this confrontation now, on our terms, rather than let him ambush either of us later. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. You're right, but I'd rather not face him alone. You won't have to, Rebecca promised. We do this together. She sent a message authorizing Marcus to be escorted up, but to the boardroom, not her private dining room. By the time he arrived, Rebecca and Vanessa were seated side by side at the conference table, a united front against the storm that was about to enter. When Marcus burst through the door, his appearance was markedly different from the polished executive of the previous evening. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and his normally immaculate suit looked slept in. There you are, he said accusingly to Vanessa, barely acknowledging Rebecca. I've been calling you all morning. I needed time to think, Vanessa replied, her voice steadier than Rebecca had expected. Marcus glanced between the two women, his expression darkening. I see you've chosen sides already. Let me guess, she's turned you against me too. You did that yourself, Vanessa responded, when you lied about everything. Marcus dismissed this with a wave of his hand. Business complications. Nothing for you to worry about. Stealing $43 million isn't a business complication, Rebecca interjected calmly. It's a crime. Marcus rounded on her. This isn't over, Rebecca. My attorney is already preparing a challenge to your supposed control. The board won't follow a housewife who's never even run a department, let alone a global corporation. Rebecca smiled slightly. The board meeting concluded 2 hours ago. The vote was unanimous in favor of my appointment as interim CEO. Even James Warrington acknowledged that your position is untenable. For a moment, Marcus looked genuinely shocked. Then his expression hardened again. This is temporary. You have no idea what you're doing. On the contrary, Rebecca replied, I've been doing your job from behind the scenes for 15 years. The only difference now is that I'll receive the credit for it. She slid a document across the table. These are the terms of your separation from Sterling Industries. I suggest you review them carefully with your attorney. You have 24 hours to accept. Marcus didn't even glance at the paper. And if I refuse, then David Chen will deliver our evidence to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning, Rebecca said simply. Embezzlement at this scale typically carries a sentence of 15 to 20 years. The color drained from Marcus's face. For the first time, the reality of his situation seemed to truly register. You wouldn't dare, he whispered. It would destroy the Sterling name, your name, the twins' name, which is why I'm offering you this alternative, Rebecca replied. But make no mistake, Marcus. If protecting the company requires legal action against you, I won't hesitate. Marcus turned to Vanessa, clearly hoping for an ally. You need to come with me. We need to present a united front for our son's sake. Vanessa shook her head. I'm not going anywhere with you. I've accepted a position in Hong Kong. Hong Kong? Marcus repeated incredulously. You can't take my son to Hong Kong. I have rights. Rights you'll likely lose if convicted of felony embezzlement, Rebecca pointed out. But even setting that aside, I'm sure we can arrange a reasonable visitation schedule if you choose to be involved in the child's life. Marcus stared at both women, the full extent of his losses finally sinking in. In less than 24 hours, he had lost his company, his reputation, his girlfriend, and potentially his freedom. This isn't fair, he said, his voice suddenly smaller. I built this company into what it is today. You were its public face, Rebecca corrected gently. But the true strength of Sterling Industries has always been its people. The thousands of employees who do their jobs with integrity every day. They deserve leadership that reflects those values. Marcus stood silent for several long moments, defeat evident in every line of his body. Finally, he picked up the separation agreement. "I'll have my lawyer review this," he said quietly. As he turned to leave, Vanessa called after him, "Marcus." He paused, a flicker of hope crossing his face. "I'll make sure our son knows who his father is," she said. "The good and the bad. The rest will be up to you." After Marcus left, Rebecca and Vanessa sat in silence for a moment, processing the encounter. "Do you think he'll sign?" Vanessa finally asked. Rebecca nodded. "He will. Marcus has always been more concerned with appearances than principles. The agreement lets him save face publicly, which matters more to him than anything else." Vanessa studied Rebecca with newfound respect. "You really do know him, don't you?" "Better than I ever did," Rebecca replied. Vanessa trailed off, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. "I've had 15 years to learn his patterns," Rebecca said with a small smile. "You had what, 2 years?" "Less," Vanessa admitted. "We only became involved after I impressed him with my presentation on the Chinese luxury market." She shook her head ruefully. "I thought he valued my mind." "He probably did," Rebecca said. "Marcus has always been attracted to intelligence. He just can't stand when it challenges his authority." She rose from her chair, signaling that their meeting was concluding. "If you're serious about the Hong Kong position, I'll have David draw up an agreement regarding the child. Something that protects your independence while acknowledging the connection to the Sterling family." Vanessa stood as well. "Thank you for everything. I know this isn't how you expected things to go." Rebecca laughed softly. "Vanessa, I've been married to Marcus Sterling for 15 years. I learned long ago to prepare for the unexpected." Her expression grew more serious. "Take care of yourself and your baby. And remember, family is more than just who signs the birth certificate." As Vanessa left, Rebecca returned to the window, looking out at the city that was home to the Sterling Empire. For generations, it had been guided by Sterling men who believed power was their birthright. Now, for the first time, it would be led by someone who had earned that power through patience, intelligence, and an unwavering focus on what truly mattered. The empire had changed hands not through revolution, but through revelation, and Rebecca Sterling was ready to guide it into a future built on stronger foundations than her husband had ever imagined. 3 months passed like the turning of seasons, gradual yet transformative. The Sterling Grand Hotel continued to gleam in the city skyline, but inside its walls, the atmosphere had shifted in subtle but significant ways. On the 62nd floor, in what had once been known simply as the Presidential Suite, but was now officially the Sterling Legacy Suite, Rebecca hosted a small gathering. The space had been redesigned under a direction, still luxurious, but warmer, with art from local artists replacing the imposing portraits of Sterling patriarchs that Marcus had favored. Sophie and Samuel moved among the guests with easy confidence, no longer the silent observers of their father's business theater, but active participants in their mother's vision for the company's future. At 19, they were still learning, but Rebecca had made it clear that their perspectives were valued. The Shanghai property projections looked promising, Samuel was saying to Victoria Xiao, who had become something of a mentor to him over the past months. The sustainability initiatives actually improved our market position rather than adding cost. Victoria nodded approvingly. Exactly what I told your mother. The Asian luxury market is increasingly environmentally conscious. It's not just good ethics, it's good business. Nearby, Sophie was deep in conversation with Jennifer Farrow, who had transitioned brilliantly from executive assistant to chief of staff. The community engagement program has applications beyond PR, Sophie was explaining. It's creating a talent pipeline from local schools directly into our management training. Eleanor Sterling observed this exchange from her seat near the window, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. At 76, she had witnessed the Sterling Empire through 3 generations of leadership, but never had she seen such organic integration of family and business values. "You've done well," she said as Rebecca joined her. "Richard would be proud, not just of what you built, but of how you built it. Rebecca took the seat beside her mother-in-law. I've had excellent examples of strength, not all of them male. Eleanor laughed softly. I'll take that compliment, though God knows I wish I'd found my voice earlier. Richard wasn't Marcus, but he was still a man of his generation. You influenced him in ways that mattered, Rebecca pointed out. The trust structure was his idea, but the succession planning had your fingerprints all over it. Perhaps, Eleanor conceded, though I never imagined it would be tested so dramatically. She glanced toward the doorway. Is she coming? Rebecca followed her gaze. She said she would. The flight from Hong Kong landed 2 hours ago. As if on cue, the doors opened to admit Vanessa Chin, now 8 months pregnant. Her professional wardrobe had been adapted for her condition, but she carried herself with a confidence that had been lacking 3 months earlier. Behind her came David Chun, who had escorted her from the airport. The room didn't fall silent at her arrival, a testament to how much had changed. Instead, she was greeted warmly by several board members who had come to know her professionally through video conferences regarding the Hong Kong operation. Rebecca crossed the room to welcome her personally. How was your flight? As comfortable as possible for someone carrying what feels like a future linebacker, Vanessa replied with a smile. The company jet makes a difference. One of the perks of partnership, Rebecca said. The Jiao Sterling collaboration is worth the occasional transatlantic comfort. In the months since the dramatic boardroom confrontation, Vanessa had indeed taken a position in Hong Kong. But rather than cutting ties with Sterling Industries, she had become instrumental in developing a joint venture between the Jiao Group and Sterling's Asian division. A legitimate version of the expansion Marcus had used as cover for his embezzlement scheme. Victoria says the Q3 projections are exceeding expectations, Vanessa reported. The cultural alignment approach is working better than traditional Western luxury models. Rebecca nodded. I saw the numbers. Your team is doing excellent work. A flash of uncertainty crossed Vanessa's face. Is he here? No, Rebecca assured her. Marcus sends his regrets. He's in Aspen for the weekend. The separation agreement had been signed without further drama. Marcus had retreated to a life of carefully maintained appearances, attending charity events, dating celebrities, and giving occasional interviews that never mentioned the mutual decision that had led to his departure from Sterling Industries. He had visitation rights to his unborn son, but had so far shown limited interest in exercising them. Sophie and Samuel are eager to see you, Rebecca continued, guiding Vanessa toward where the twins were conversing with board members. Samuel has questions about the Hong Kong educational system. I think he's considering a semester abroad. As they approached, Sophie immediately embraced Vanessa, a gesture that would have been unimaginable 3 months earlier. You look amazing. How much longer now? For weeks officially, but my doctor thinks he might arrive early, Vanessa replied, one hand resting on her prominent belly. Samuel, more reserved, but equally welcoming, offered Vanessa's seat. We've been following the Hong Kong project. Your cultural integration model is fascinating. As the conversation flowed naturally between business and personal matters, Rebecca stepped back slightly, observing the interaction with quiet satisfaction. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just a relaxed exchange of people connected by both professional respect and an unusual family bond. Eleanor joined her, following her gaze. Not exactly the family dynamic I expected in my golden years, she commented dryly. Rebecca smiled. Family evolves. The Sterlings more than most, it seems. Indeed. Eleanor's expression turned more serious. Have you told them about the board's decision? Not yet. I wanted everyone together first. Eleanor nodded in understanding. It's time, I think. Rebecca took a deep breath and moved to the center of the room, gently tapping her glass to gain everyone's attention. The conversations quieted as all eyes turned to her. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began. 3 months ago, Sterling Industries faced a critical moment in its history. The path forward wasn't clear, and the challenges seemed daunting. She looked around at the assembled faces, board members, executives, family, all watching her with respect. She had earned rather than inherited. I agreed to serve as interim CEO during that turbulent transition. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the board has reached a unanimous decision regarding the permanent leadership structure of Sterling Industries. Harold Winters, who had been quietly conversing with David Chen, stepped forward with an official-looking folder. "As board chairman, I have the honor of formalizing this appointment," he said, opening the document. "Effective immediately, Rebecca Sterling will continue, not as interim, but as permanent Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Industries." Applause filled the room, with Sophie and Samuel exchanging proud glances. Even Vanessa joined in enthusiastically. When the applause subsided, Rebecca continued, "I accept this responsibility with humility and determination. But leadership isn't about a single person. It's about creating a structure that reflects our values and secures our future." She gestured to David Chun, who stepped forward with several additional folders. "Today also marks the formal establishment of the Sterling Legacy Trust, a new structure that will ensure the company's independence and ethical governance for generations to come." David began distributing the documents. As Rebecca explained, 51% of Sterling Industries will be held in trust, guided by a charter that emphasizes sustainability, ethical business practices, and community investment. The trust will be overseen by a council including family members and independent advisors. She turned to her children. "Sophie, Samuel, as you come of age, you'll have the opportunity to earn positions of leadership, but nothing will be handed to you simply because of your name. The Sterling legacy must be earned through merit, integrity, and vision." The twins nodded solemnly, accepting both the opportunity and the responsibility their mother was outlining. Rebecca then turned to Vanessa. "The charter also acknowledges all Sterling descendants equally. Your son will have the same opportunities as Sophie and Samuel, should he choose to pursue them, not because of his father, but because family extends beyond the choices of individuals." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears as she placed a protective hand over her belly. "Thank you," she whispered, as the formal announcements concluded and the gathering returned to more casual conversations. Rebecca found herself standing by the windows, overlooking the city where the Sterling story had begun 3 generations earlier. The family name adorned buildings, charitable foundations, and business cards, a legacy built by men who believed power was their birthright. Now that legacy would continue under different terms, not erasing the past, but building on it with stronger foundations and clearer values. "Penny, for your thoughts," came Eleanor's voice as she joined Rebecca at the window. Rebecca smiled. "I was thinking about Richard, actually, whether he foresaw any of this when he created that trust 15 years ago." Eleanor considered this. "Richard was a strategist. He recognized your strength when Marcus couldn't see beyond his own reflection. But even Richard couldn't have predicted exactly how it would unfold." She gazed out at the city lights. "He gave you the tools. You chose when and how to use them. That was your wisdom, not his." From across the room came the sound of laughter. Sophie was showing Vanessa something on her phone, while Samuel explained some technical concept to Victoria and Harold. The future of Sterling Industries was taking shape in those connections, those relationships built on respect rather than obligation. "What happens next?" Eleanor asked quietly. Rebecca thought about the strategic plan on her desk, the international expansion, the sustainability initiatives, the corporate governance reforms. All important, all part of her vision for Sterling Industries. But as she watched her children and the woman who carried their half-brother, she recognized that the most significant part of her legacy wouldn't be measured in profit margins or stock prices. "We build something worthy of them," she answered simply. "Something they can be proud to inherit, not just the power, but the responsibility that comes with it." Eleanor nodded approvingly. Richard would drink to that. Rebecca raised her glass slightly, to the true meaning of legacy. As the evening continued around them, the 2 women stood in companionable silence, watching the future unfold in real time. A future shaped not by the man who had tried to claim the empire as his personal kingdom, but by those who understood that true power lies in what you build for others, not what you keep for yourself. The Sterling Empire had found its true heir, not in a single person, but in a vision of leadership that would endure long after the current generation had passed the torch to the next. And in that quiet moment of reflection, Rebecca knew that the most difficult decision of her life had also been the most necessary one, not just for herself, but for everyone who depended on her courage to do what was right when it mattered most. If you enjoyed the story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories of power, betrayal, and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Until next time.